The studio buzzed with anticipation, murmurs rippling through the crowd like low thunder. Al Pacino sat at the center of it all, calm, composed, a living legend wrapped in a tailored black suit. Across from him, the reporter, a sharp-jawed man, with a knowing smirk, adjusted his cufflinks like he owned the moment. Then he struck. "So, Al," the reporter drawled, dragging out the name like a cat toying with a mouse. "Some say you're a relic of old Hollywood, coasting on past glory. You ever worry that you're irrelevant?" A hush fell over the room. The air grew thick, heavy. Someone in the front row shifted uncomfortably. Even the crew, seasoned professionals, froze behind their cameras, waiting for the explosion. Pacino didn't move. He simply blinked, slow, deliberate. A lesser man would have lashed out, fired back. But Al Pacino, he sat there letting the words breathe, letting the weight of them sink into the room. The reporter, emboldened by the silence, leaned in, his smirk widening. "I mean, come on. Does it ever hit you that the world has moved on?" Pacino exhaled, finally breaking the pause. He rested his hands on his knees, fingers slightly curled. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked onto the man in front of him. And then, with the precision of a stage actor stepping into his scene, he spoke. "You want an answer?" he said, voice slow, gravelly. "All right, kid. Listen close." The reporter's smirk deepened. He thrived on this. The tension, the spectacle. "Oh, I'm all ears," he said, settling back in his chair like he had all the time in the world. The audience, however, wasn't as relaxed. Some sat rigid, eyes locked on Pacino. Others exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew this moment could go one of two ways: a quiet deflection or an unforgettable response. Pacino let the silence stretch a little longer, his fingers tapping idly on the armrest. Then he leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Let me tell you something about relevance," he said, voice carrying that signature slow-burn intensity. "You think it comes from headlines, from Twitter trends, from what some kid with a microphone says?" His eyes flicked toward the reporter, sharp as a blade. "Relevance is earned. It's not about who's shouting the loudest. It's about who leaves an echo." A murmur rippled through the audience. The weight of his words settled over the room like a storm cloud. But the reporter, ever the provocateur, refused to back down. He chuckled, shaking his head. "So that's it? You're saying you don't care?" He gestured toward the cameras. "Come on, Al, we both know the industry's changed. You think some kid today, someone who grew up on TikTok, cares about a monologue from The Godfather?" Someone in the crowd audibly gasped. A few nervous chuckles scattered across the room, unsure whether to side with awe or discomfort. The tension thickened, the air dense with anticipation. But Pacino, he just smiled, a small, knowing grin that barely curled his lips. "You know what's funny?" he said, voice barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in. "You keep talking about the next generation, but here you are, sitting across from me, asking the last one for validation." The reporter's smile flickered, just for a second, a beat of hesitation, a crack in the armor. The audience felt it, saw it. And Pacino? He saw it too. He wasn't done yet. The reporter shifted in his seat, his smirk thinner now, less certain. The crack had formed, but he wasn't ready to let Pacino take control. Not yet. With a forced chuckle, he adjusted his tie. All right, he said, waving a hand. "You got me. But let's be real, Al. Legends fade. People move on. Don't you ever wonder if, one day, no one will care?" The words hung, in the air, deliberately cruel. The audience tensed, watching Pacino like he was a lit fuse. But the legend didn't flinch. Instead, he exhaled, slow and steady, before tilting his head. "Tell me something, kid," he said, eyes narrowing. "You ever seen Dog Day Afternoon?" The reporter blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, of course." Pacino nodded, as if he expected that answer. "You remember what Sonny said? That one line?" He leaned in, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "I'm dying over here." His fingers drummed against his knee. "You remember why people still quote that?" The reporter hesitated, sensing the trap. "Because it was Intense? A soft chuckle rumbled from Pacino's chest. No, kid, because it was real. His eyes locked onto the reporter's, unblinking. You see, people don't remember movies because of box office numbers. They don't remember actors because of headlines. They remember the truth we bring to the screen. And truth don't fade. The audience buzzed, murmurs spreading like wildfire. The weight of the words landed, not just on the reporter, but on everyone in the room. And for the first time, the man who had strutted into this interview with his smug grin and cutting sarcasm looked uneasy. Pacino leaned back, letting the silence stretch, letting the reporter sit in it. Then, with a small shrug, he delivered the final blow. So you ask if I worry about being forgotten? He smirked, just slightly. You tell me, kid. Who's gonna remember you? The crowd erupted. The reporter's smile was gone. His jaw clenched, fingers tightening around his cue cards. For the first time, he wasn't leading the conversation. Pacino was. The audience knew it. He knew it. And worst of all, Pacino knew it. Still, the reporter wasn't ready to surrender. He straightened his shoulders, trying to regain control. All right, Al, he said, forcing a chuckle. You win the nostalgia argument. But let's be honest. Hollywood isn't what it used to be. Do you ever feel like a man out of time? Pacino's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something sharp, unreadable. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, thoughtful. Then he spoke. You ever watch a fire burn, kid? His voice was calm, almost conversational. At first, it's wild, untamed. Flames dance, unpredictable, fast. That's the industry, right? New faces, new trends, new people thinking they've reinvented the game. He nodded, as if indulging the thought. But you ever notice what happens after the fire's burned a while? The reporter said nothing. The entire room was holding its breath. Pacino leaned in, his voice dropping just enough to force the reporter to listen. The wild flames die down. The smoke clears. And what's left? He let the question hang for a beat, then answered it himself. The embers, the ones that burn slow, the ones that last. His eyes locked onto the reporter's. That's what I am, kid. Not a flash in the pan, not some viral moment. I burn slow. And slow burns? They never go out. The audience erupted. Applause. Cheers. A woman in the front row wiped a tear. Even the cameraman, a seasoned professional, grinned behind the lens. But the reporter? He was silent, exposed. No script, no cutting remark, no sarcastic lifeline to grab onto. He shifted in his seat, swallowed hard, and looked down, anywhere but at Pacino. And just like that, the fire had burned out. The applause was thunderous, rolling through the studio like an unstoppable wave. People weren't just clapping, they were moved. The kind of raw electric energy that didn't come from clever quips or cheap viral moments. This was truth. Pacino let it settle, his expression unchanged. He wasn't basking in the moment. He wasn't gloating. He was just there, steady as ever, watching the reporter with something that almost resembled patience. The reporter exhaled, a long, slow breath. When he finally looked up, his smugness was gone. No forced grin, no snarky comeback. Just a man who had come looking for an easy headline and found himself sitting across from something bigger than he could handle. He started to speak, then hesitated. He cleared his throat, straightened his tie. That was, something, he admitted, voice quieter now. Humbled. Pacino just nodded. Yeah, he said. It was. The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It wasn't a battle. It was the kind of quiet that happened when a lesson had been learned, when a perspective had been shifted. The audience felt it. The cameras caught it. And somewhere beyond the walls of that studio, millions of people watching would feel it too. Pacino stood up, slow and steady. He gave the reporter one last look, not with condescension, not with triumph, but with something close to understanding. Then, with a small smirk, he adjusted his cufflinks, turned to the crowd, and walked off. The room remained silent for a beat longer. Then a single clap, another, and then, as if the whole world had finally caught its breath, the cheers returned, louder than before, and the embers burned on. If this moment gave you chills, if it made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite Pacino performance, and subscribe for more legendary moments. And hey, share this with someone who needs a reminder that true greatness never fades. See you in the next one.